The phone rang at 2:14 a.m., shattering the silence of Taekyung's penthouse in Gangnam. He stared at the unknown number glowing on his screen, every instinct screaming danger. In his world, calls at this hour meant blood, betrayal, or both. Mr. Han, the voice was professional, detached, speaking Korean. This is Asen Medical Center. Your wife. Ex-wife, he corrected. Ice forming in his chest. Your ex-wife, Zora Washington, is scheduled for a bedside wedding ceremony in our chapel at 3 a.m. The groom, Mr. Kim Jin-soo, has requested we proceed despite her being in active labor. A pause. The bride asked that we notify you. She said you'd want to know about your daughter. The room tilted. 3 months. It had been 3 months since he'd signed those divorce papers, since he'd watched Zora walk out of his life with tears streaming down her face and rage in her eyes. 3 months of drowning in regret and whiskey, of building walls so high even his brother couldn't scale them. And now this. My daughter. His voice came out strangled. Mrs. Washington is 9 months pregnant. The baby's father is listed as unknown, but she specifically requested we call you before the ceremony. Mr. Kim is insisting they marry before the birth. Taekyung was already moving toward the door, his heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to break free. Don't let that ceremony happen. I'll be there in 10 minutes. 3 years earlier, Zora Washington had learned early that life didn't hand out fairness like free samples at Costco. At 28, she was teaching English at a private academy in Seoul, living in a tiny studio in Itaewon, and still trying to figure out how she'd ended up on the other side of the world from her family in Atlanta. But she had her independence, her grandmother's gold cross around her neck, and a smile that could light up the darkest room. The Lotus Lounge wasn't just any club. Everyone in Seoul knew it belonged to the Han family, one of the most powerful Korean organized crime families in the city. Zora knew the rumors, saw the way people whispered when certain men entered, watched how the staff moved with military precision when handling VIP reservations. But her friend Minji worked coat check there. The money was good for weekend shifts, and Zora had learned to navigate dangerous waters with grace. She never expected to collide, literally, with the man who owned it all. It happened on a Friday night, the club pulsing with bass-heavy K-hip-hop and expensive cologne. Zora balanced a tray of champagne glasses, weaving through the crowd with practiced precision. She didn't see him until it was too late. A wall of solid muscle in a tailored black suit, turning at the exact wrong moment. The tray flew. Glass shattered. Champagne splashed across pristine Italian leather shoes and the bottom of perfectly pressed slacks. Time stopped. Zora's heart dropped to her knees as she looked up, and up, into the coldest, most beautiful face she'd ever seen. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut diamonds, and eyes like black ice that seemed to see straight through her soul. A thin scar traced from his left eyebrow to his temple, the only imperfection on an otherwise devastating face. Visible tattoos crept up from his collar, traditional Korean dragons and phoenixes that marked him as someone important, someone dangerous. I am so sorry, she stammered immediately, dropping to her knees to pick up the broken glass, her hands shaking. Around them, the club fell silent. Everyone was watching. Please, I'll pay for dry cleaning, I'll. Stop. One word, delivered in a voice like smoke and steel with a Seoul accent that made her pulse skip. A hand appeared in her line of vision. Long fingers, immaculate nails, a platinum watch that probably cost more than her yearly salary. You'll cut yourself. Zora froze, torn between survival instinct and the shocking gentleness in that command. Slowly, she looked up again. He was crouched now, eye level with her, and this close she could see gold flecks in those dark eyes, could smell his cologne, something expensive and cedar-scented that made her breath catch. I'm really sorry, Mr. Han. His gaze moved over her face with an intensity that made her skin heat. Taekyung. And you are unemployed, probably, she muttered before she could stop herself. The corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it transformed his face from intimidating to breathtaking. You think I would fire someone for an accident? You're the owner. It wasn't a question. Everyone knew Han Taekyung owned the Lotus Lounge, along with half the nightlife in Gangnam and several businesses that definitely didn't operate entirely within legal bounds. And I just ruined your very expensive shoes. They're just shoes. He stood in one fluid movement, extending his hand again, this time clearly to help her up. But you're right about one thing. You work for me now. Zora blinked. certain she'd misheard over the music that had cautiously started again. What? Not here. He glanced around at the watching faces, and they all suddenly found somewhere else to look. My companies always need good people. Someone who apologizes before making excuses, who thinks of consequences. His eyes held hers. That's rare. Come to my office Monday. We'll discuss your skills. I'm just an English teacher and a part-time waitress, Zora said, still kneeling in broken glass and spilled champagne, wondering if she'd hit her head. Monday, 9 a.m. Han Tower, 35th floor. He pulled a business card from his jacket, pressed it into her palm. His fingers were warm, his touch brief but electric. Don't be late, Miss Washington. Zora. Zora Washington. Zora. He said her name like he was tasting it, like it was something precious. Then he nodded once and walked away, his ruined shoes leaving wet prints on the marble floor, his presence parting the crowd like Moses at the Red Sea. Zora knelt there for a full minute after he disappeared, her heart racing, the business card burning in her hand like a promise or a threat, she couldn't tell which. Around her, the other servers were already whispering, shooting her looks that ranged from envious to pitying. Girl, you don't know what you just got yourself into, Minji murmured as she helped Zora stand. That man is dangerous. I know, Zora whispered back, pocketing the card with trembling fingers. But dangerous in what way? Dangerous to her safety, or dangerous to something far more vital, like her heart? She'd find out Monday. Zora's contractions were coming every 3 minutes now, each one stealing her breath and making her double over in the wheelchair Minji was frantically pushing through the hospital corridors. But Jin-soo walked ahead of them with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean to someone about marriage certificates and expedited processing, like her pain was just an inconvenient scheduling conflict. Jin-soo, she gasped between contractions. We need to stop this. I need to get to labor and delivery, I need. The chapel is right here, he said smoothly, ending his call and gesturing to ornate wooden doors. The officiant is waiting. We can do this in 10 minutes, sign the papers, and then get you upstairs. The baby will have my name, Zora. Legal protection. Everything we discussed. Everything they discussed. A marriage of convenience. Protection for her baby. Korean citizenship. A life built on practical necessity instead of the love she'd lost 3 months ago when Taekyung had looked at her with those cold eyes and said their marriage was a liability he couldn't afford. Another contraction hit, and Zora cried out, gripping the wheelchair arms until her knuckles went white. Through the pain, she heard Minji arguing with Jin-soo in Korean, her voice rising in panic, but Jin-soo's response was calm, insistent, immovable. The chapel doors opened. A nervous-looking officiant stood at a small altar, and Jin-soo was already pulling papers from his briefcase, laying them out with the efficiency of a business transaction, which Zora realized with sick clarity was exactly what this was to him. Let's begin, Jin-soo said, positioning himself beside her wheelchair. The officiant started speaking in Korean, and Zora felt tears burning behind her eyes because this was all wrong. She shouldn't be getting married in a hospital chapel while her body was trying to bring her daughter into the world. She shouldn't be marrying a man whose touch made her skin crawl, whose kindness always felt like manipulation wrapped in expensive silk. She should be with. The chapel doors exploded inward with a bang that made everyone jump. Taekyung stood in the doorway like an avenging angel dressed in sweatpants and a hastily thrown-on jacket, his hair wild, his chest heaving like he'd run the entire way. His eyes, those black ice eyes that had haunted her dreams for 3 months, locked onto Zora with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. Then his gaze shifted to Jin-soo, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Step away from my wife, Taekyung said, his voice deadly quiet. Ex-wife, Jin-soo corrected with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. Zora is free to marry whoever she chooses. She's in labor with my daughter. Taekyung moved forward, and 2 of Jin-soo's security men appeared from the shadows, but Taekyung didn't even glance at them. You think I'm going to let you claim my child while she's too vulnerable to fight back? Another contraction hit, and Zora's cry of pain cut through the standoff. Both men turned to her immediately, and she saw it, the flash of genuine concern on Taekyung's face, the calculated assessment in Jin-soo's eyes as he weighed his options. Get out, Zora gasped, looking at both of them through tears of pain and rage. Both of you just... I'm not leaving, Taekyung said, dropping to his knees beside her wheelchair, his hand reaching for hers. Zora, please. I know I have no right, but don't do this. Don't marry him. Don't let him use our daughter as a pawn. You divorced me, she choked out, even as her hand instinctively gripped his. You said I was a weakness. You chose your organization over me, over us. I was wrong. His voice cracked, raw and desperate. I was so wrong, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it if you give me the chance. But right now, right here, don't sign those papers. Please. Jinsu's expression hardened. Security, remove him. But Taekyung was already standing, and the look on his face made even armed men hesitate. 3 months ago, Zora had come home from teaching to find Taekyung sitting in their penthouse living room with divorce papers spread across the coffee table like accusations. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring. That was the first thing she noticed, and her stomach had dropped before he even spoke. We need to talk, he said, his voice flat, emotionless, nothing like the man who'd whispered promises against her skin just that morning. About what? But she already knew. She'd felt him pulling away for weeks, ever since that meeting with the chairman, ever since whispers started circulating through the organization about the Han family's half-black American wife being a problem. This isn't working. Taekyung gestured between them without meeting her eyes. Our marriage. It's become a liability I can't afford. The words hit like physical blows. A liability. The chairman made it clear. An interracial marriage damages our standing with traditional families. It makes me look weak, like I'm more interested in love than power. His jaw tightened. I have responsibilities, Zora. To my brother, to the organization, to hundreds of people who depend on me. I can't let personal feelings compromise that. Zora's hands shook as she sank onto the couch. Personal feelings? Is that what 2 years of marriage is to you? Personal feelings you can just set aside when they become inconvenient. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were that cold black ice again, the warmth she'd worked so hard to thaw completely frozen over. I've arranged a settlement. The apartment in Itaewon is yours. Fully paid. There's money in an account that will support you comfortably. You can stay in Korea or return to the States, whatever you want. What I want. Her voice broke. I want my husband. I want the man who promised me we'd face everything together. Where is he, Taekyung? Because the person sitting in front of me right now is a stranger. Something flickered in his expression. There and gone so fast she almost missed it. That man was a fool who thought love could exist in my world. I'm correcting that mistake. I'm a mistake. Tears were streaming down her face now. Hot and bitter. Our marriage, everything we built, that's all just a mistake to you? Sign the papers, Zora. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with movements that were too controlled, too precise. My lawyer will handle everything. You don't need to see me again. She looked at the papers, at her name next to his in black and white, at the legal dissolution of everything she believed in. What if I fight this? What if I refuse to sign? Then I'll make you. His voice went even colder. I'll have my people investigate your visa status, your work permits, every detail of your life here. I'll make staying in Korea so difficult you'll have no choice but to leave. Don't make me be that person, Zora. Just sign and walk away with your dignity intact. The threat was clear, and it came from someone who had the power and resources to follow through. Zora's hand trembled as she picked up the pen, and she hated herself for the hope that flared when he stepped closer. Maybe he'd stop her, maybe this was some kind of test, maybe. But he just watched with that impassive expression as she signed her name, effectively ending their marriage with a few strokes of ink. I loved you, she whispered, setting down the pen. I loved you so much I moved across the world for you. I learned your language, navigated your world, accepted parts of your life that terrified me. And you're throwing that away because some old men in suits think I'm not Korean enough. I'm doing this to protect you. The words came out harsh. You don't understand the kind of pressure I'm under, the threats being made. If you stay married to me, you become a target. This way, you're nobody. You're safe. I never asked to be safe. She stood, rage replacing heartbreak. I asked to be your partner, your equal. But you're making this decision alone, just like you make every decision. You never trusted me enough to let me into your world completely. Did you? I was always just the English teacher you thought you could keep separate from the darkness. He flinched, and she knew she'd hit home. Goodbye, Zora. That's it. 2 years of marriage and I get goodbye. Her laugh was brittle, broken. You're a coward, Taekyung. You're hiding behind duty and responsibility because you're too afraid to actually fight for something you want. His hand was on the door when he stopped, his back to her. You're right. I am a coward. But at least you'll be alive to hate me for it. Then he was gone, and Zora collapsed onto the couch, her wedding ring still on her finger, her heart shattered into pieces she didn't know how to put back together. She didn't know she was pregnant yet. Wouldn't know for another week when the nausea started and the test showed 2 pink lines and her world tilted all over again. The pregnancy test sat on the bathroom counter like an accusation. 2 pink lines screaming the truth Zora had been denying for a week. Her hands shook as she picked it up, staring at it like the lines might rearrange themselves into something that made sense, something that didn't completely destroy the fragile control she'd been maintaining since signing those divorce papers. Pregnant. She was pregnant with Taekyung's baby. And the divorce had been finalized yesterday. Min-ji found her an hour later, still sitting on the bathroom floor, the test clutched in her hands. Tears dried on her cheeks because she'd run out of them somewhere around the 30-minute mark. Oh honey, Min-ji whispered, sinking down beside her. How far along? 6 weeks, maybe 7. Zora's voice came out hollow. I thought the nausea was just stress from the divorce. I thought. She laughed, the sound cracked and bitter. I thought a lot of things. You have to tell him. I can't. The panic that had been building in her chest threatened to suffocate her. Min-ji, he made it very clear he doesn't want me in his life. What's he going to do if I show up pregnant? Think I'm trying to trap him? Use the baby to get money. He has a right to know he's going to be a father. Zora looked at her friend, this woman who'd been her lifeline and soul, who'd held her through the worst of the divorce. Does he, though? He chose his organization over me. He called our marriage a liability. What kind of father would he be to a child he never wanted? But even as she said it, she remembered the way Taekyung had looked at his nephew once, this tiny baby that his brother's girlfriend had brought to a family dinner. The softness in his eyes, the gentle way he'd held the infant like something precious and breakable. He'd whispered something in Korean, and when Zora asked him to translate later, he'd smiled sadly and said, I told him to be stronger than his uncle, to choose love over fear. That man would want to know about his child. But that man had also divorced her without looking back. I'll go tomorrow, Zora decided, pushing herself off the bathroom floor. I'll go to his office and tell him. Whatever happens after that, at least I'll know I tried. The next day, Zora stood outside Han Tower, her stomach churning with nerves and morning sickness. She'd dressed carefully, not trying too hard but not looking broken either. She wanted to tell him with dignity, with her head held high. The receptionist's smile was polite but dismissive when Zora asked to see Taekyung. Mr. Han isn't taking unscheduled appointments. If you'd like to leave a message, just tell him Zora is here. He'll see me. But it wasn't Taekyung who appeared. It was Kong, his head of security, the man who'd always treated Zora with cautious respect during her marriage. Now his expression was apologetic but firm. Mrs. Washington. It's just Washington now, she corrected, hating how much it hurt to say. Miss Washington. Mr. Han asked me to speak with you. He's made it clear he doesn't wish to have contact. The divorce settlement was generous. There's nothing more to discuss. I need 5 minutes. It's important. Kang's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry. He was very explicit. No contact means no contact. He paused, seeming to struggle with something, then added quietly. He's moved on, Miss Washington. There's an engagement being arranged with the Park family. It's better if you don't make this harder on yourself. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Engaged. He was already engaged to someone else, probably to the daughter of some crime family ally, someone appropriately Korean, someone who wouldn't be a liability. Zora's hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach, protective of the tiny life growing there that Taekyung would never know about. Tell him. She stopped, pride warring with desperation. Never mind. Tell him nothing. She turned and walked away from Han Tower, from the father of her child, from the last shred of hope she'd been carrying. She wouldn't tell him now. Wouldn't give him the chance to reject their baby the way he'd rejected her. She'd do this alone, raise this child with the fierce love her grandmother had taught her, and Taekyung would never need to know what he'd lost. It was the second biggest mistake of her life. The first had been loving him in the first place. 6 weeks pregnant and running out of money, Zora sat in a coffee shop in Hongdae, staring at her dwindling bank account on her phone. The divorce settlement had seemed generous until she'd realized how expensive prenatal care was in Seoul, how her teaching job's insurance wouldn't cover maternity leave, how the apartment Taekyung had given her came with maintenance fees that ate through her savings faster than she could replenish them. She was going to have to go back to Atlanta. Back to her grandmother's tiny apartment. Back to a country where she'd have support but also questions she didn't know how to answer. Back to admitting that her grand adventure in Korea had ended in heartbreak and single motherhood. Zora Washington. She looked up to find a man in an expensive suit standing beside her table. His smile polite but his eyes calculating. He was handsome in a conventional way, nothing like Taekyung's dangerous beauty, and something about him made her skin prickle with warning. "Do I know you?" Kim Jin-soo. He gestured to the empty chair. "May I?" She should have said no. Should have listened to the instinct that screamed danger. But exhaustion and desperation made her nod, and Jin-soo sat with the careful posture of someone who'd been raised in wealth and power. "I know who you are," he said simply. Taekyung's ex-wife. The woman he divorced to appease the chairman's outdated ideas about bloodlines and tradition. Zora's hand instinctively moved to her stomach. "What do you want?" "To help you." His smile widened. "I'm aware of your situation. 6 weeks pregnant, limited resources, no family in Korea. The father doesn't even know, does he?" Fear spiked through her. "How do you?" "I make it my business to know things about the Han family. Taekyung and I have a complicated history. Business rivals, you could say." Jin-soo leaned back, utterly relaxed. "I also know that raising a child alone in a foreign country is nearly impossible, especially when the father is a crime boss who's already made it clear he wants nothing to do with you. Get to the point. Marry me." Zora laughed, the sound sharp with hysteria. "You're insane." "I'm practical." Jin-soo pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. "A marriage of convenience. I need a wife to satisfy my own family's expectations. You need legal protection, citizenship for your child, and financial stability. We both get what we want." She opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were documents outlining an arrangement that was purely transactional. Separate bedrooms, no intimacy, a contract that would give her baby the Kim family name and all the protection that came with it. "Why would you do this?" Zora looked up at him. "What do you actually get out of this?" Jin-soo's smile took on an edge. "Let's just say having Taekyung's heir raised as a Kim would be satisfying. The child would be legitimate, protected, and completely outside his reach. You'd have everything you need, and I'd have fulfilled my family obligations while making a point to an old rival. This is about revenge. This is about mutual benefit." He pushed a pen toward her. "Think about it. Your other option is going back to America, raising your child alone, always wondering if Taekyung will someday find out and try to take custody. With me, you'd have legal protection, Korean citizenship for your baby, a life here if you want it." Zora thought about her dwindling savings, about the morning sickness that made teaching difficult, about the loneliness of being pregnant in a country where she had one friend and a whole network of her ex-husband's people who'd been told to stay away from her. "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow." Jin-soo stood, straightening his suit. "After that, the offer expires." "I'm patient, Zora, but I'm not desperate. You, however." He let the implication hang. She hated him in that moment. Hated his smug certainty. His manipulation wrapped in offers of help. But she hated her situation more. The next day, she called him. "I have conditions," she said when he answered. "I keep working. I make my own money. And if Taekyung ever finds out about the baby, you don't interfere with custody arrangements." "Taekyung won't find out," Jin-soo replied smoothly. "That's the point. But agreed to your terms. I'll have my lawyer draw up the contracts." Zora hung up and immediately threw up in the bathroom, though whether from morning sickness or self-loathing, she couldn't tell. She was selling her future to spite a man who'd already made it clear he didn't want her. But her baby would be safe, legal, protected. That had to be enough. The standoff in the hospital chapel shattered when another contraction ripped through Zora with such intensity she screamed. Her hands white-knuckled on the wheelchair arms. Both men moved toward her simultaneously, and their collision was inevitable. Taekyung shoving Jin-soo back hard enough to send him stumbling, Jin-soo's security reaching for weapons that hospital staff were already shouting about. Enough. The obstetrician's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Dr. Park stood in the chapel doorway, her expression thunderous. My patient is in active labor, and you're all acting like children fighting over a toy. Security is on the way, and if you don't move this circus to the delivery floor right now, none of you will be present for this birth. That got their attention. Taekyung immediately backed off, his hands raised in surrender, while Jin-soo straightened his jacket with barely contained fury. Min-ji was already pushing Zora's wheelchair past all of them, following Dr. Park's rapid strides toward the elevator. Both of you can follow or stay here, Dr. Park said without looking back. But if you follow, you will behave like civilized human beings or I will have you removed from my hospital. Understood. They followed. Of course they followed. Zora could feel them behind her like twin storm systems, Taekyung's desperate energy and Jin-soo's cold calculation, and she wanted to scream at both of them that this wasn't about them, had never been about them, was only about her and the baby girl who was determined to enter the world in the middle of a war zone. The delivery room was sterile and bright, and when the nurses helped Zora onto the bed, both men tried to enter. Family only, Dr. Park said firmly, blocking the doorway. I'm the father, Taekyung said immediately. I'm the husband, Jin-soo countered, pulling out a half-signed marriage certificate like it was a weapon. Zora looked at them both, these powerful men who thought they could decide her future, who'd both in their own ways tried to control her choices, who were still fighting over her like she was territory to be claimed, and something inside her snapped. Get out, she said, her voice cutting through their argument with absolute authority. Both of you. Get the hell out of my delivery room. They stared at her in shock. Zora, Taekyung started. I said get out. Her voice rose to a shout. You divorced me because I was inconvenient. You, she turned her fury on Jin-soo, tried to buy me like a business transaction. Neither of you asked me what I wanted. Neither of you treated me like a person instead of a problem to solve or a prize to win. So now you both can wait outside while I deliver my daughter with people who actually respect me. You can't, Jin-soo began, but Min-ji was already physically pushing him toward the door. She can and she is, Min-ji said fiercely. And if you have a problem with it, you can take it up with hospital security. Taekyung hadn't moved. He stood there looking at Zora with such raw pain in his eyes that she almost softened. Please, he whispered. Zora, I know I have no right, but please don't shut me out of this. You shut yourself out 3 months ago. Her voice cracked but held firm. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Min-ji stays. You both leave. For a moment she thought he might refuse. Thought he might pull rank or make threats or use the power he'd always wielded so effortlessly. But instead, he just nodded once, his expression devastated, and backed toward the door. I'll be right outside, he said quietly. When she's born, when you're ready. I'll be right here. So will I, Jin-soo added, though his tone was significantly colder. Then they were gone, and Zora could finally breathe. Could finally focus on what mattered. Bringing her daughter safely into a world that was already far more complicated than any child deserved. You did good, Min-ji said, squeezing her hand as another contraction built. Really good. Dr. Park smiled approvingly. Now let's have a baby. 4 hours later, Zora held her daughter for the first time. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfect brown skin and dark hair, her tiny fists waving as she let out indignant cries that filled Zora's entire world. Everything else fell away. The pain, the exhaustion, the 2 men waiting outside like sentries. None of it mattered compared to this miracle in her arms. She's beautiful, Min-ji whispered, tears streaming down her face. Zora, she's absolutely perfect. She is, Zora agreed, her own tears falling onto her daughter's blanket. She really is. Dr. Park finished the final checks and smiled. Both of you are healthy. You did wonderfully. She paused delicately. Should I send in the fathers? Father. The men outside are making my nurses nervous. Zora looked down at her daughter, at this tiny person who deserved better than being fought over before she'd even taken her first breath. Give me 30 minutes. Just us. Then you can send in Taekyung. Just him. When Taekyung entered the recovery room, he moved like a man approaching something sacred and terrifying. His eyes went immediately to the baby in Zora's arms, and the expression that crossed his face was so raw, so full of wonder and pain and love, that Zora's carefully constructed walls cracked just slightly. Can I? His voice broke. Can I hold her? Zora nodded, and when she placed their daughter in Taekyung's arms, she watched this feared crime boss who'd never shown weakness to anyone completely fall apart. Tears streamed down his face as he stared at the baby, his hands trembling as he cradled her with infinite gentleness. She has your nose, he whispered. And your mouth. She's perfect, Zora. She's absolutely perfect. Her name is Amara, Zora said quietly. It means eternal, strong, beautiful. Amara. He repeated it like a prayer, then looked up at Zora with devastation in his eyes. I'm so sorry. For everything. For the divorce, for making you think I didn't want you, for missing your pregnancy, for almost missing this. Why did you do it? The question that had haunted her for 3 months finally emerged. Why did you really divorce me, Taekyung? And don't tell me I was a liability. I want the truth. He sat carefully in the chair beside her bed, still holding Amara like she might disappear. The chairman gave me an ultimatum. Divorce you and marry Park Ji-won to cement an alliance with her father's organization, or he'd declare me unfit to lead. He'd back my rivals, start a war that would destroy everything my family built and kill dozens of people who depend on us. Zora's breath caught. You never told me. I thought if I told you, you'd insist on staying. On fighting. His voice was rough with emotion. And I couldn't risk your life in a war between crime families. You're not part of this world, Zora. You shouldn't have to pay for my choices with your blood. So you made me pay with my heart instead. I thought you'd be safer hating me than loving me. He looked at Amara, then back at Zora. I thought if I cut you off completely, made you leave, you'd go back to America and build a life far away from the danger. I didn't know you were pregnant. I swear if I'd known, you would have what? Kept me anyway. Used our baby as an excuse to defy the chairman. Zora's anger flared. Or would you have still pushed me away and just felt worse about it? I don't know, he admitted, and the honesty in it hurt more than a lie would have. I was trying to keep you alive, and instead I destroyed us. Amara made a small sound, and they both looked down at her. This innocent life who existed because they'd loved each other once, who would grow up in the shadow of their choices whether they wanted her to or not. The revelation came not from Jin-soo himself, but from an unexpected source. Taekyung's younger brother Min-jun burst into the recovery room 2 hours later, his face flushed with rage and his phone clutched in his hand like evidence. You need to see this, he said without preamble, then stopped short when he saw Amara sleeping in Zora's arms. His expression softened immediately. Oh, wow, she's beautiful. What do I need to see? Zora asked, though dread was already pooling in her stomach. Min-jun glanced at Taekyung, who nodded, then held out his phone. On the screen was a recording, security footage from what looked like Jin-soo's office, the timestamp from 2 weeks ago. Jin-soo sat behind his desk, speaking to someone off-camera in Korean. Min-jun translated quietly. He's saying that once he marries Zora and the baby is born with the Kim name, he'll have leverage over the entire Han organization. He says Taekyung's legitimate heir raised as a Kim will split loyalties in the syndicate, create factions, weaken the Han family's power base. Zora's blood ran cold as Jin-soo's voice continued, and Min-jun kept translating. He's telling his associate that he never intended to actually protect Zora. He says once the marriage is legal and the baby has his name, he'll make sure Zora understands her place. That she'll be isolated, dependent, useful for producing more heirs if needed but otherwise kept quiet and controlled. Turn it off, Zora whispered, feeling sick. Min-jun complied immediately. Taekyung's expression had gone absolutely murderous. Where did you get this? Jin-soo's head of security has been on our payroll for 6 months, Min-jun said grimly. He sent this the moment he heard about the wedding attempt. He said he couldn't let it happen, that Jin-soo's plan was too dangerous. Zora looked down at Amara, Her daughter, who Jinsu had seen only as a weapon, a tool to destroy the Han family and position himself for power. She'd been so desperate for protection, for stability, that she'd nearly handed her baby to a man who would have used her as a pawn in games Zora didn't even fully understand. He was never going to protect us, she said quietly. Everything he offered, the citizenship, the security, the Kim family name, it was all just bait. He would have isolated you completely, Taekyung said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Cut you off from Min-ji, from anyone who could help you leave. You would have been trapped, and Amara would have grown up as his leverage against me, against our entire organization. Where is he now? Zora asked. Still outside, Minjun said with a dark smile. Demanding to see you. Threatening to sue the hospital. Making a scene. Zora looked at Taekyung, at the man who'd broken her heart trying to protect her, who'd made terrible choices out of love disguised as pragmatism. I want to talk to him. I want to look him in the eye and tell him exactly what I think of his plan. Zora. I'm not asking permission. She held his gaze. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You can be there or not, but I'm done with men making decisions for me. Taekyung looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then we do it together. You say what you need to say, and I'll make sure he understands there are consequences for trying to use my family. When Jin-soo entered the recovery room, his smile was already in place, concerned and caring. Zora, I've been so worried. They wouldn't let me in. And use my daughter as a weapon. His face went carefully blank. I don't know what he's told you. We have recordings, Taekyung said quietly. Your head of security is very thorough. Every meeting, every plan, every intention. All documented. Jin-soo's mask cracked just slightly. You can't prove. Get out, Zora interrupted. Get out of this hospital, out of my life, and if you ever come near my daughter again, I'll make sure everyone in Seoul's underworld knows exactly what kind of man you are. A coward who uses pregnant women and babies to fight wars he's too weak to win himself. For a moment, rage flashed in Jin-soo's eyes, raw and undisguised. Then it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. This isn't over. Yes, Taekyung said, stepping forward. It is. After Jin-soo left, escorted out by hospital security and Minjun's barely concealed threats, Zora asked for an hour alone with Amara. She needed to think, to process everything that had happened in the span of 12 hours. She'd gone into labor preparing to marry one man, discovered the father of her child still loved her, learned that her would-be husband had planned to use her baby as a weapon, and now sat holding her daughter while trying to figure out what came next. When she finally called Taekyung back in, she'd made her decisions. Sit down, she said, and he obeyed immediately, his eyes never leaving Amara's sleeping face. We need to talk about how this is going to work. Anything, he said quickly. Whatever you need, whatever terms you want. I'll agree to anything. Don't agree yet. Listen first. Zora adjusted Amara in her arms, drawing strength from her daughter's warm weight. Legal custody stays with me. Sole custody. Your name goes on the birth certificate as father, but I have final say in all decisions about her life. She saw him flinch, but he nodded. Understood. You get visitation. Supervised at first, until I'm comfortable with you being alone with her. And Taekyung, she met his eyes directly. If you want to be part of her life, you need to transition out of the violent parts of your organization. I won't have my daughter visiting her father in prison or getting a phone call that you've been killed in some gang war. I've already started the process, he said quietly. After the divorce, I began moving operational control to Min-jun. I'm transitioning to the legitimate businesses. Real estate, imports, the nightclubs. It'll take time to fully extract myself, but I'm doing it. Zora studied his face, looking for lies, for the manipulation she'd learned to recognize. But all she saw was exhaustion and hope and desperate sincerity. Why? If it wasn't for us, why start transitioning? Because you were right. That day you left, you said I was a coward hiding behind duty and responsibility. You were right. He leaned forward, careful not to disturb Amara. I spent 3 months drowning in regret, realizing I'd destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too afraid to actually fight for what I wanted. So I started fighting. Not with violence, but with strategy. Building alliances, shifting power structures, creating a path out. And the chairman? The ultimatum. The chairman had a heart attack 6 weeks ago. He's alive, but he's no longer in control. The landscape has changed. Taekyung's jaw tightened. I could have reached out to you then. Should have. But I thought you'd moved on, and I didn't want to disrupt your life again. I was 6 months pregnant and desperate enough to almost marry your enemy, Zora said bluntly. Does that sound like moving on? No. It sounds like I failed you so completely you felt you had no other choice. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Zora. For all of it. For the divorce, for not trusting you with the truth, for letting you think you were alone. Amara stirred in Zora's arms, making small sounds that would escalate to crying if she wasn't fed soon. Zora looked down at her daughter. This perfect, innocent life who deserved better than parents whose relationship was built on mistakes and missed chances. I have more terms, she said firmly. Name them. We don't live together. I get my own place, paid for by you if that's what it takes, but in my name only. You visit on a schedule we both agree to. And Taekyung, if you ever make a major decision about our daughter without consulting me first, I will take her and disappear so thoroughly you'll never find us. Are we clear? Crystal clear. And one more thing. She held his gaze. I don't know if we can ever be us again. What you did hurt me deeply, and trust doesn't rebuild overnight. So don't expect me to fall back into your arms just because you're sorry and we have a baby together. Pain flashed in his eyes, but he nodded. I understand. I'll earn it back, Zora. However long it takes. 6 months later, Zora stood in the kitchen of her apartment in Hanam-dong. 3 bedrooms, a view of the Han River, deed in her name only. Watching through the window as Taekyung pushed Amara's stroller through the building's garden. Her daughter was laughing at something he was saying, her chubby hands reaching for the cherry blossoms falling around them like pink snow. It was their routine now. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, all day Saturday. Taekyung would arrive exactly on time, never late, never making excuses. He'd changed diapers and learned to make bottles at the precise temperature Amara preferred. He sang to her in Korean, the same lullabies his mother had sung to him. He'd baby-proofed his own penthouse for the overnight visits that had started last month. After 4 months of supervised time had convinced Zora he was serious about being present, about being safe. You're staring, Minji said from the couch, where she was folding tiny baby clothes with the expertise of someone who'd become honorary auntie. The lovesick staring is getting obvious. I'm not lovesick, Zora protested, but even she could hear the lie in her voice. Girl, please. You've been on 3 actual dates with him in the past month. You let him kiss you goodnight last week. You're absolutely lovesick, you're just being smart about it this time. Smart about it meant establishing boundaries Zora had never set in their first marriage. It meant Taekyung asking permission before buying Amara expensive gifts. It meant weekly co-parenting meetings where they discussed everything from sleep schedules to future childcare. It meant slow, careful rebuilding of trust that had been shattered. It also meant those 3 dates, dinner at quiet restaurants where they talked about everything except the past, a walk through Namsan Park where Taekyung had held her hand like it was precious, a late-night conversation on her balcony that had ended with a kiss that tasted like second chances and terrifying hope. The apartment door opened, and Taekyung maneuvered the stroller inside with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this hundreds of times now. Amara was half asleep, her face sticky with the organic fruit pouch Taekyung spoiled her with despite Zora's lectures about sugar content. She walked 3 steps today, he announced, his face lit with pride. In the garden. She held onto the bench and then just walked toward me. She what? Zora abandoned the window, moving to the stroller. Amara walked. Well, toddled aggressively, Taekyung amended, grinning. But it counts. Minji tactfully excused herself, citing a non-existent appointment, and suddenly it was just the 3 of them. Their strange little family that didn't quite fit any conventional definition but was theirs nonetheless. Stay for dinner, Zora said, surprising herself. They had rules about this. Visits had end times. Boundaries existed for a reason. But watching him with their daughter, seeing the man he was becoming rather than the one he'd been, made her want to break her own rules. Taekyung looked at her carefully. Are you sure? I'm sure. Over japchae that Taekyung cooked while Zora gave Amara a bath. Over shared laughter when their daughter threw rice across the high-chair tray. Over quiet conversation after Amara fell asleep between them on the couch, Zora felt something shift. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. For the changes you've made. Minjun told me you haven't been involved in anything violent in 5 months. That you're really transitioning out. I meant what I said in the hospital. I want to be the father she deserves, the man you deserved all along. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I destroyed what we had. But Zora, if you'll let me, I want to build something better. Not the relationship we had before, but something stronger. Something based on honesty and respect and actually being partners instead of me making decisions alone. Zora looked at their joined hands, at the daughter sleeping peacefully between them, at the life they were slowly, carefully constructing from the ruins of their first attempt. I'm not ready to move back in together, she said. I'm not ready to get remarried or make big promises about forever. I know. But I'm ready to try. Really try. To see if we can be something real this time. The kiss that followed was tender and hopeful and tasted like new beginnings. When they broke apart, Amara was still sleeping peacefully, and Zora thought maybe, just maybe, they could actually make this work. Not perfectly. Not without stumbles and setbacks and hard conversations. But together as equals, as partners choosing each other every day. And that was enough.